You think your workplace runs on merit and hard work. That's exactly what someone who understands the 48 laws of power wants you to believe. The truth? Your office is a modern court with its own unspoken rules of advancement and protection. In the next 15 minutes, I'll show you how to recognize when someone is using law number 14 against you, posing as a friend while gathering intelligence. How to defend yourself with law number 3, concealing your intentions, and why your transparency might be the very thing holding you back from the recognition you deserve. Have you ever wondered why the hardest worker rarely gets the promotion? The answer lies in what Robert Greene calls the game of power, a game you're playing whether you realize it or not. In his renowned book, The 48 Laws of Power, Greene unveils the hidden dynamics that shape our professional trajectories, often operating entirely beneath our conscious awareness. Every workplace operates on two parallel systems: the official merit-based structure we all acknowledge, and the unspoken power dynamics that truly determine who advances. These invisible rules govern career progression more definitively than any performance metric on your annual review. What's particularly troubling is how many professionals remain blissfully unaware of this dual reality. Research reveals a startling truth. Political intelligence is increasingly recognized as essential for career advancement. Yet many high performers continue to face significant promotion setbacks due to political naivety. These talented individuals excel in their technical roles, but fail to navigate the complex web of workplace politics that ultimately determines who climbs the corporate ladder. The problem isn't simply that power dynamics exist. It's that most people refuse to acknowledge their existence. This willful blindness makes them vulnerable to those who understand and navigate these currents effectively. Studies show a strong correlation between political savvy and career advancement rates. Those who grasp these unwritten rules progress faster than equally talented colleagues who remain politically unaware. Consider the stark lessons from history. In Renaissance courts, those who ignored power dynamics didn't merely stagnate in their positions, they often lost everything. Courtiers who failed to recognize intricate political maneuvers found themselves outmaneuvered by more astute rivals. These historical figures learned too late that merit alone offers little protection in environments where power is the primary currency. Today's corporate environment might not be life-threatening, but career advancement still depends heavily on understanding these unwritten rules. In modern workplaces, employees unaware of power dynamics frequently find themselves sidelined despite their contributions. Their work is overshadowed by colleagues who may be less talented but more adept at navigating the organization's invisible battlefield. The cost of power ignorance manifests in various ways: missed promotions despite exceptional performance, watching credit for your ideas transfer to more politically savvy colleagues, and being blindsided by office politics you never saw coming. These experiences leave many professionals confused and demoralized, wondering why their dedication and results don't translate into the recognition they deserve. What many fail to understand is that workplace advancement operates through two distinct but interconnected systems. The official system, with its performance reviews, metrics, and formal feedback, exists alongside an unofficial system of alliances, perceptions, and strategic positioning. Success requires mastery of both. Consider this revealing scenario. Two employees deliver identical results, but one consistently receives better opportunities. The difference often lies not in their work quality, but in their understanding of power dynamics. The successful employee knows which projects attract visibility, how to position achievements for maximum impact, and when selective transparency serves their interests better than complete openness. What if you could recognize these invisible power moves before they affect your career? What if you could decode the unspoken language of workplace influence that determines who advances and who stagnates? This awareness wouldn't require abandoning your principles or becoming manipulative. It simply means removing the blindfold that currently places you at a disadvantage. Most professionals unknowingly violate power laws at work, sabotaging their own careers through naive transparency and misplaced trust. They operate as if the workplace were a perfectly fair meritocracy, while their more politically astute colleagues recognize it as a complex ecosystem of competing interests and strategic alliances. The ability to navigate these waters ethically, defending your position without becoming manipulative, is perhaps the most undervalued professional skill. It allows you to protect your contributions, position your achievements effectively, and ensure your talents receive appropriate recognition. Without this skill, even the most impressive capabilities may remain unrecognized and unrewarded. While protecting your contributions matters, the way you share information could be undermining your efforts entirely. Consider this paradox. The virtue you were taught since childhood, complete honesty, might be your greatest professional weakness. In negotiations, successful professionals reveal less than a third of their priorities, while unsuccessful ones disclose more than twice that amount. This startling contrast reveals a fundamental truth about power dynamics that most well-intentioned professionals never consider. The childhood lessons about honesty that served you well in building personal relationships create dangerous vulnerabilities in professional settings. When we examine Greene's Law No. 3, Conceal Your Intentions, we find a principle that directly challenges conventional wisdom about transparency. Law No. 4 reinforces this concept with the principle, always say less than necessary. By speaking too much, you weaken your position and diminish your power. This isn't manipulation. It's recognizing that information has value that diminishes when freely given. Consider what happens in a typical negotiation. Research shows that successful negotiators disclose only about 31% of their priorities, while those who struggle reveal nearly 70%. This stark difference doesn't indicate dishonesty among successful negotiators. Rather, it demonstrates their understanding of strategic disclosure. By carefully selecting what information to share, they maintain leverage while still engaging honestly. The workplace applications of this principle extend far beyond formal negotiations. Imagine your manager casually asks about your 5-year career plan. Your instinct for transparency might lead you to share your ambition to reach their position or even surpass it. While this honesty seems virtuous, it transforms a potential advocate into a threat-conscious obstacle. Your transparency has just created an adversary where you needed an ally. Strategic disclosure operates on a simple principle: information is power. Those who share everything surrender their advantage to others who may not have your best interests at heart. The executives who advance most effectively understand that selective transparency allows them to maintain strategic leverage while still building necessary relationships. This balance represents one of the most underappreciated professional skills. This isn't about becoming deceptive. There's a critical distinction between strategic disclosure and dishonesty. Strategic disclosure involves carefully choosing what information to share, when to share it, and with whom, all without saying anything untrue. Dishonesty, by contrast, actively creates false impressions and inevitably damages trust when discovered. The former builds your position, the latter undermines it. The psychological foundations of this approach are well established. When you disclose everything immediately, you remove all mystery and intrigue from professional relationships. Human nature responds more attentively to partial information than complete transparency. By maintaining some measure of reserve, you create a natural curiosity that actually increases your perceived value and authority. Even in collaborative environments, strategic disclosure remains essential. Teams function best when members share relevant information, but this doesn't require revealing every thought, concern, or ambition. The most effective team members understand what information serves the collective goal and what information might create unnecessary complications or conflicts. Consider how politicians and executives navigate complex stakeholder relationships. They rarely lie outright. The risks of discovery are too great, but they carefully manage what information they share with different audiences. This selective transparency allows them to maintain productive relationships with groups that might otherwise find themselves in opposition. The same principle applies in your professional life. Who's asking the questions can tell you everything about their intentions. That colleague who always seems fascinated by your latest project might be genuinely supportive, or they could be gathering intelligence. This distinction isn't paranoia. It's a crucial awareness that Robert Greene highlights in Law Number 14. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. What makes this power dynamic particularly dangerous is its exploitation of our natural tendency to trust those who show interest in us. The most damaging workplace betrayals rarely come from known rivals. Studies reveal that 65% come from those we considered allies. When someone poses as a friend while operating as a spy, they create the perfect conditions for extracting valuable information. Think about how easily you share details with someone who nods encouragingly, asks thoughtful follow-up questions, and appears genuinely interested in your success. This natural human response, to open up to those who show interest, creates vulnerability that strategic players recognize and exploit. This tactic isn't new. Renaissance courtiers mastered the art of false friendship centuries ago. They would deliberately cultivate relationships with political rivals, breaking bread together while memorizing weaknesses, mapping out alliances, and identifying leverage points. These seemingly warm relationships served as intelligence operations, with every dinner conversation potentially revealing some useful insight to be weaponized later. The friendly face across the table wasn't a friend at all, but a professional information gatherer. The modern workplace hasn't abandoned these tactics. It's simply updated them. Your colleague doesn't need to report to the king. They're playing their own long game. Pay attention to certain revealing patterns. Does this person consistently ask detailed questions about your projects while sharing almost nothing substantial about their own work? This one-way information flow should trigger caution. Even more telling is when their interest intensifies immediately after you receive recognition or praise. Sudden curiosity following your success often signals someone studying your playbook rather than celebrating your achievement. The psychology behind this tactic works because most professionals have been conditioned to equate openness with teamwork. We're taught that good colleagues share freely, support each other, and maintain transparency. This cultural expectation creates the perfect environment for those who understand the strategic value of information. While you believe you're building rapport through open exchange, they recognize they're accumulating leverage through intelligence gathering. When your colleague asks detailed questions about your innovative project approach, complete transparency might mean giving away your competitive advantage. When a peer inquires about your relationship with senior leadership, unfiltered honesty could transform casual interest into targeted undermining. The professional who succeeds long-term recognizes these scenarios and responds with appropriate strategic disclosure. Your transparency at work, that instinct to share everything in the name of honesty and openness, is likely hurting your professional advancement by giving others a roadmap to outmaneuver you. By revealing all your priorities, concerns, and ambitions, you provide others with the exact information they need to position themselves advantageously against you. The alternative isn't dishonesty, but rather a thoughtful approach to information sharing that protects your professional interests. Consider Sarah, a marketing director who couldn't understand why her carefully developed campaign strategies kept being implemented by other teams before her department could launch them. The mystery was solved when she realized her lunch companion, a colleague who regularly bought her coffee and asked detailed questions about her upcoming projects, was systematically feeding this information to competing departments. The friendly interest wasn't supportive, it was surveillance. The professional world contains both genuine allies and strategic operators. Learning to distinguish between them doesn't require becoming cynical, just more observant. Watch for reciprocity in information sharing. Authentic professional relationships involve mutual exchange, while intelligence operations are characterized by imbalance. Notice whether someone's questions probe specifically for actionable information rather than showing genuine curiosity about your perspective or growth. Pay attention to timing. Does their interest peak when you have something valuable to share? Defending against this tactic doesn't mean becoming secretive or paranoid. It simply means applying law number 3, conceal your intentions, selectively, even with apparent allies. Practice strategic disclosure by considering the potential competitive value of information before sharing it. Establish professional boundaries that allow for authentic connection without sacrificing your strategic position. Test relationships with small, inconsequential information before sharing details that could impact your professional standing. The distinction between genuine workplace friendships and strategic relationships often becomes visible through consistency and reciprocity. Authentic allies take interest in you as a person beyond what you can offer professionally. They share their own challenges and insights rather than simply extracting yours. They celebrate your successes without immediately probing for your next moves. Most importantly, their support remains consistent regardless of your current value to their objectives. Displaying brilliance can be dangerous territory at work. Think about the times your innovative ideas were inexplicably shut down, or when your thorough analysis was met with dismissal rather than praise. This puzzling phenomenon has a name in Robert Greene's framework, law number 1, never outshine the master. While we're conditioned to showcase our capabilities to climb the professional ladder, this well-intentioned approach often yields the opposite result, creating invisible barriers to your advancement. The instinct to demonstrate your full intellectual capacity seems logical. After all, shouldn't organizations want their brightest minds contributing at maximum capacity? Yet this assumption overlooks a fundamental aspect of human psychology that operates in hierarchical structures. When you present solutions that make you look brilliant, you may inadvertently make your superior feel intellectually threatened rather than supported. This dynamic isn't merely theoretical speculation. A revealing survey of executives uncovered that 72% admitted to deliberately blocking the advancement of subordinates whose intelligence made them feel inferior. This startling statistic contradicts the meritocratic ideal most organizations claim to uphold. Your supervisor's resistance to your ideas might have nothing to do with the quality of your work and everything to do with the psychological threat your competence represents. The mechanism behind this reaction stems from a primal place. Those in positions of authority often maintain fragile egos that require constant reinforcement of their status. When you solve problems your boss couldn't or generate ideas that outshine theirs, you unintentionally challenge the narrative they've constructed about their superior capabilities. Your brilliance becomes reframed as insubordination rather than contribution. This psychological principle manifests across various workplace scenarios. Consider the meeting where your well-researched proposal was dismissed without substantial feedback, or when your solution to a long-standing problem was ignored until your manager presented a similar idea weeks later. These experiences aren't coincidental, but predictable outcomes of violating law number 1. The historical precedent for this dynamic stretches back centuries. Throughout the ages, advisors to kings who displayed too much intelligence frequently found themselves removed from their positions, or worse, regardless of the value they provided to the kingdom. One notable historical example comes from 17th century France, where Nicolas Fouquet, finance minister to King Louis XIV, made the catastrophic error of throwing an extravagant party at his newly completed chateau. The lavish display was intended to honor the king, but instead triggered Louis's insecurity. The magnificence of Fouquet's estate made the king's own palace seem inferior by comparison. Shortly after this display, Fouquet was arrested and imprisoned for life, not because he was disloyal, but because he outshone his master. This same dynamic persists in modern corporate environments, though with less dramatic consequences. The innovation you believe will fast-track your career might actually derail it if presented incorrectly. Your brilliant analysis that identifies flaws in current strategy could be perceived not as helpful problem-solving, but as an indirect criticism of leadership's oversight. The solution isn't to diminish your capabilities or hide your talents. Rather, it requires mastering the subtle art of making your superiors feel secure in their position while still contributing your value. This means framing your ideas as extensions of their vision rather than replacements for it. Instead of presenting a revolutionary approach that implicitly criticizes current methods, position your contribution as building upon the foundation they established. In practice, this might look like prefacing your ideas with acknowledgments of your boss's previous insights. Phrases like "building on your approach" or "your strategy made me think about how we could extend it to" create continuity rather than contrast. This technique allows you to advance innovative ideas while reinforcing rather than threatening your superior status. The art of not outshining also involves careful calibration of when and how to present your ideas. Private settings often work better than public forums where your boss might feel compelled to defend their authority. Similarly, written proposals that give your manager time to process and potentially incorporate your ideas as their own can be more effective than spontaneous suggestions that might catch them off guard. Robert Greene advises going further, suggesting that one should deliberately make those above them feel smarter and more capable. This doesn't mean feigning incompetence, but rather creating opportunities for your boss to shine. Your goal should be positioning yourself as an asset that enhances your superior's success, rather than a rival who threatens to eclipse it. This strategic approach requires emotional intelligence and careful observation of your particular manager's insecurities and priorities. The ethical minefield surrounding power tactics isn't a simple black and white issue. Understanding power dynamics doesn't automatically turn you into a manipulator. Quite the opposite. When you recognize the invisible forces at play in your professional environment, you gain a protective shield that preserves both your effectiveness and your integrity. Many readers approach Greene's laws with apprehension, fearing that acknowledging power dynamics means surrendering their moral compass. This misinterpretation misses the crucial distinction between offensive and defensive applications of these principles. The real question isn't whether to understand power, but rather how to use that understanding as a weapon or as armor. Think of power knowledge like martial arts training. The most skilled practitioners don't seek confrontation. They develop expertise primarily for self-defense. Similarly, Greene's framework provides tools for recognizing when others are employing power tactics against you, allowing you to respond from a place of awareness rather than naivety. This defensive approach consists of three essential components. First comes recognition, developing the ability to identify power moves as they unfold. When a colleague consistently volunteers for high-visibility assignments while avoiding substantive work, you're witnessing law number 7. Get others to do work for you, but take all the credit in action. The second component is protection, implementing boundaries and safeguards against manipulation. The final element is strategic response, countering power plays without compromising your integrity. Consider how this works in practice. When you notice a teammate subtly claiming credit for your contributions during a presentation, your untrained response might be immediate confrontation, creating unnecessary conflict. With defensive power knowledge, you might instead document your inputs beforehand, establish visibility with key stakeholders, and redirect credit appropriately without accusation or hostility. Psychological studies reveal a fascinating pattern. Those familiar with manipulation tactics become significantly less likely to be manipulated. This knowledge creates a protective barrier against deceptive practices, allowing you to maintain control in complex social situations. Rather than falling victim to power plays, you recognize them for what they are and respond strategically rather than reactively. Greene himself clarifies this intention, stating, "The laws were written primarily to help readers recognize these tactics when used against them." This perspective frames the 48 laws not as a manual for manipulation, but as a protective guide for navigating complex social environments. The laws serve as a mirror, reflecting the tactics already being used in professional settings, allowing you to detect them before they impact your career. What makes this approach ethical is its foundation in transparency and integrity. By understanding power dynamics, you can respond to manipulation without becoming manipulative yourself. This maintains trust and fosters genuine collaboration rather than undermining it. Your reputation, that essential professional currency, remains intact as you navigate challenging situations with awareness rather than deception. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of defensive power knowledge is what psychologists call the paradox of power awareness. Those who thoroughly understand power dynamics often demonstrate more ethical behavior, not less. Why? Because they don't need to resort to desperate reactive measures when confronted with threats. Instead, they can respond thoughtfully and proportionately, maintaining their integrity even in challenging circumstances. Consider two professionals facing the same attempt at manipulation. The first, unaware of power dynamics, might either become a victim or respond with disproportionate aggression once they realize what's happening. The second, well-versed in power principles, recognizes the attempt immediately and implements measured countermeasures without escalating the situation. Which response preserves more workplace harmony and personal integrity? This strategic approach creates a workplace environment where transparency flourishes within appropriate boundaries. Rather than naively oversharing or cynically withholding, professionals who understand defensive power use can establish relationships based on authentic but prudent disclosure. They know when openness serves the collective good and when it might be exploited. Experts in organizational behavior consistently find that ethical power use, maintaining transparency while navigating complex social dynamics, fosters precisely the trust and collaboration that make teams effective. Far from undermining workplace relationships, this awareness strengthens them by removing the vulnerability that often leads to exploitation. The defensive framework also provides psychological benefits. When you understand manipulation tactics, workplace interactions that might once have triggered stress, confusion, or self-doubt become comprehensible. This awareness reduces anxiety and increases confidence, allowing you to respond from a position of emotional balance rather than reactivity. Think about how differently you might experience a challenging workplace situation when equipped with this knowledge. Without it, you might wonder why your contributions are being overlooked, or why certain colleagues seem to advance despite minimal effort. With defensive power awareness, these patterns become transparent, allowing you to navigate them effectively without compromising your values. Recognizing power dynamics is just the first step. Tactical application is where true mastery begins. Have you ever wondered why certain professionals consistently receive credit for their contributions, while others watch their ideas being claimed by colleagues? The difference rarely lies in work quality, but rather in their strategic application of specific power principles to everyday workplace challenges. When facing credit theft, that frustrating moment when your brilliant idea suddenly becomes someone else's brainchild, your approach must be deliberate and proactive. By combining law number 5, reputation management, with law number 9, win through actions, you create a protective shield around your contributions. This isn't about paranoia. It's about documentation and strategic visibility. Before project completion, establish your connection to the work through documented communications, progress updates, and selective demonstrations to key stakeholders. This approach emphasizes demonstrating results rather than merely discussing them, making it significantly harder for others to claim your accomplishments as their own. Consider how differently a presentation might unfold when you've already laid groundwork for recognition. Instead of frantically trying to reclaim credit after it's been stolen, you've created a situation where your contribution is already acknowledged, making theft both difficult and risky for potential credit stealers. Information extraction scenarios require an entirely different tactical combination. When colleagues probe for details about your projects or strategies, the powerful pairing of law number 4, say less than necessary, with law number 17, keep others in suspended terror, provides protection. This doesn't mean becoming secretive or threatening. Rather, it means revealing information strategically and maintaining an element of unpredictability in professional interactions. By methodically controlling information flow and occasionally surprising colleagues with unexpected approaches, you keep competitors off balance while maintaining your strategic advantage. The formation of workplace alliances presents a particularly nuanced challenge. Here, the combination of law number 2, never trust friends completely, and law number 20, do not commit to anyone, creates a balanced approach that protects your independence while still building valuable connections. This strategy allows you to maintain flexibility in your professional relationships, ensuring you don't become overly dependent on any single alliance that could later become problematic. This approach doesn't mean avoiding meaningful workplace relationships. It means building networks thoughtfully while maintaining healthy boundaries. By avoiding complete dependence on specific colleagues or mentors, you create a resilient professional ecosystem rather than a fragile structure that collapses when a single relationship changes. For visibility management, perhaps the most subtle of the 4 scenarios, the key lies in balancing law number 6, court attention, with law number 16, use absence to increase respect. The professional who masters this combination knows both when to showcase their contributions and when strategic absence actually increases their perceived value. By creating a strong presence while also knowing when to step back, you remain memorable without overwhelming others or creating visibility fatigue. Think of professionals who seem consistently influential despite not always being the loudest voice in the room. They understand that strategic visibility isn't about constant presence, but about meaningful contributions followed by calculated spaces that allow others to recognize their value. This balanced approach enhances reputation and influence within organizations far more effectively than constant self-promotion. The practical application of these law combinations requires regular assessment of your professional environment. By consistently evaluating your power dynamics and relationships, you develop awareness of how your actions and reputation influence your standing within your organization. This self-awareness becomes the foundation for tactical decisions about when and how to apply specific laws. You might wonder how to implement these strategies without appearing calculating or manipulative. The answer lies in genuine professional development rather than self-serving tactics. When you frame your approach as continuous improvement and relationship management rather than power plays, these applications become natural extensions of professional growth rather than manipulative maneuvers. For example, documenting your contributions isn't about preventing theft, it's about project clarity and communication. Maintaining independence in alliances isn't about distrust, it's about professional flexibility and resilience. Reframing these approaches as professional best practices rather than power tactics allows you to implement them authentically without compromising your values. Beyond defensive tactics lies a deeper transformation, the evolution from reactive professional to strategic power player. Most struggle for years with office politics, never realizing there exists a systematic approach to power awareness that, once internalized, becomes as natural as breathing and can dramatically accelerate career advancement, even in the most turbulent environments. Power intelligence, the ability to recognize, manage, and use one's powers effectively in ways that benefit both oneself and others, represents the critical difference between professionals who merely survive organizational challenges and those who consistently rise above them. This capability goes beyond simply understanding personal power derived from expertise or experience. It fundamentally changes how you perceive workplace interactions. Consider the developmental journey toward power intelligence. Unlike technical skills that can be acquired through straightforward training, power awareness follows a three-stage progression that transforms your professional instincts. The first stage, recognition, involves identifying power dynamics as they unfold around you. The second stage, application, requires deliberately implementing defensive strategies against potential threats. But the third stage, internalization, is where true transformation occurs, as power awareness becomes an unconscious competence that guides your decisions automatically. This progression mirrors how we develop any sophisticated mental framework. Initially awkward and requiring conscious effort, power intelligence eventually becomes second nature through consistent practice and regular feedback loops. Many professionals abandon this journey during the uncomfortable application phase, never realizing how close they were to breakthrough. Take Jennifer, a mid-level manager at a multinational corporation facing extensive restructuring. While her colleagues reacted with panic as news broke that 40% of positions at their level would be eliminated, Jennifer approached the situation differently. Having developed power intelligence over several years, she immediately conducted what experts call a power audit, systematically assessing which departments held actual decision-making authority, which executives were gaining influence, and which projects were receiving priority funding despite cutbacks elsewhere. Rather than desperately trying to prove her value through increased work hours, a common but ineffective reaction, Jennifer strategically realigned her responsibilities with emerging priorities and cultivated relationships with rising power centers. She built alliances across departments based on mutual benefit rather than desperation, making herself indispensable to the organization's new direction. When restructuring concluded, Jennifer not only retained her position, but received expanded responsibilities, while many equally qualified colleagues were displaced. The key difference wasn't superior technical skills. It was her intuitive power awareness that allowed her to navigate the changing landscape proactively rather than reactively. This exemplifies the compound effect of power intelligence. Each successful application builds reputation capital that makes future advancement progressively easier. Those with developed power intelligence don't just survive organizational challenges, they often emerge strengthened by them. What's particularly notable about power intelligence is how it becomes systematized through regular practice. Leading executives frequently incorporate what amounts to power audits into their professional routines, regularly assessing their environment for both threats and opportunities. They evaluate which relationships need maintenance, which projects carry political significance beyond their stated objectives, and where competing interests might create friction that affects their goals. Rather, it's about developing a sixth sense that intuitively processes power dynamics as naturally as you process verbal communication. You begin to notice subtle shifts in influence, anticipate potential conflicts before they materialize, and position yourself advantageously without conscious calculation. The transformation may seem gradual at first, but certain tipping points accelerate development. Many professionals report a moment when power dynamics suddenly become visible, like seeing the matrix code behind everyday interactions. These moments of clarity often follow successfully navigating a particularly challenging political situation, providing validation that the approach works. How quickly can this transformation occur? While the timeline varies based on your starting awareness and organizational complexity, most professionals see meaningful improvements within 6 months of deliberate practice. Full internalization typically requires at least 2 years of consistent application across varying scenarios. The investment pays extraordinary dividends, however, as your career advancement accelerates while your stress levels often decrease. What makes power intelligence particularly valuable is that it doesn't require becoming manipulative or abandoning your values. In fact, those with the highest power intelligence typically maintain stronger ethical standards precisely because they don't feel cornered into desperate measures. They have the clarity to see multiple pathways forward and the confidence to choose options aligned with their principles. As we conclude, it's worth remembering what Robert Greene himself emphasizes about his work. He explicitly states that the 48 laws of power should be used as a shield, not a sword. This defensive orientation reveals the true purpose of understanding power dynamics, not to manipulate others, but to protect yourself from those who already wield these tactics against you. Think of power awareness as removing a blindfold you didn't even know you were wearing. When you understand these principles, workplace interactions gain clarity and purpose. You begin to see the underlying currents that influence decisions and relationships. This awareness doesn't corrupt your integrity. It strengthens it by allowing you to make informed choices rather than being unwittingly maneuvered. The most profound insight here is that power dynamics exist whether you acknowledge them or not. You're already on the game board. The only question is whether you'll play consciously or remain a pawn moved by others who understand the rules you've chosen to ignore.